The word geek used to be a pejorative. For example, it once referred to carnival performers whose act consisted of biting heads off chickens or eating glass. Over time, it came to be applied to anyone who did work considered odd or bizarre by mainstream society. Today, the term enjoys a special status within the technology, science, and math communities, while being widely understood as referring to a person who, though possibly socially awkward, is nonetheless single-minded and accomplished in their pursuits. I'm proud to say that over the years, Idea City has presented many such geeks and helped stimulate a new respect for them. Actually, these days, with each newly minted baby billionaire being called geeky is no longer a put-down, but a name to be worn with pride. Find the geek, and you will as likely find the person who will hit on the next big idea, make the next big breakthrough, help a billion people, and make $1 billion. Now, believe it or not, there are already some people who are saying that the last great flood of fundamental scientific leaps and technical innovations are behind us, and only incrementalism lies ahead. But there are the others who say you ain't seen nothing yet. They say that our accelerations are accelerating, as all human knowledge converges at the singularity in which everything becomes information, science, and technology. And we're only talking about 20, 25 years from now. So this world of deep breakthroughs and fabulous and funny gadgets moves and changes at breakneck speed as more and more global minds join the party and contribute to human well-being. So to help us get our bearings as to where we're at and where we ought to be going, I'm pleased to kick off this gaggle of geeks with the great cartographer of these brave new digital worlds, Don Tapscott. There he is. Welcome.
Well, arguably the biggest impact of the digital revolution is on people, and specifically the first generation to come of age in the digital age. And these kids are different for sure. If we could just go back a couple of slides, that'd be great. And many of you in this audience are under the age of 32, and many watching online are as well. So I'd like to speak to you frankly about your generation. You are the dumbest generation. The digital age is stupefying you, and it's jeopardizing our future. This English professor named Mark Berline says, don't trust anyone under 30. The internet is eating the neocortex of youth today, says Robert Bly in the Sibling Society. You're also ignorant. You know who won American Idol, but you can't put France on a map. You're also Generation Me. Jean Twenge says in a book of that title that we've created a little army of narcissists. All you care about is Facebook and YouTube and MySpace and tweeting, and you don't give a damn about society, you just care about yourself. You're net addicted, and you're glued to the screen, and you're losing your social skills, and you're rude. And furthermore, you're a lonely bunch. You go to parties, and rather than interacting face-to-face like humans, you're staring into your little screens, lost and alone, says Sherry Turkle in a book called Alone Together. You're violent, and you're a bunch of bullies. Actually, half of you are bullies, and half of you are being bullied. And the internet gives you your 15 minutes of fame, and you can go online and take a picture of you beating up a friend and become really famous. And you have bad values. You lack integrity. You're dishonest. You cheat. You've created an epidemic of plagiarism in the schools, and you have a terrible youth culture. You're into terrible rap music that's violent and sexist, and furthermore, you're into drugs and alcohol and all kinds of risk-averse youth culture. You should be ashamed of yourself. Now, it's a great stereotype. Unfortunately, after having conducted the biggest study ever of this generation, or ever generation, a $4 million research project, where we interviewed 11,000 young people in 10 countries, I'm here to tell you that that stereotype is a great one, but it's not supported by any data. So let me tell you about what this generation is really like. Now, I started studying kids about 20 years ago when I noticed how my own children were effortlessly able to use all this sophisticated technology. And at first I thought, my children are prodigies. But then I noticed all of their friends were like them, so that was a bad theory. So I started working with 300 kids, and I wrote this book, Growing Up Digital, in 1997. I said, kids will have no fear of technology because it's not there. It's like the air. Flash forward to today, they're not just growing up, they've grown up. They're coming into the workforce, into the marketplace, into society, and there's no more powerful force to change every institution than the first generation of digital natives. I'm a digital immigrant. I had to learn the language. Now, the first reason that we should care a lot about this digital generation is that they're huge. Now, we call them the boomlet. They're the echo of the baby boom, born between 1978 and 1997. But they're not a boomlet. The echo is actually louder than the boom. In the United States, there are 80 million of them, 8 million in Canada. There are only 78.5 million in the US, or 7.8 million in Canada. So based on their demographic muscle alone, this generation is going to dominate the 21st century. In 15 years, they'll be 75% of the workforce in Canada. But what makes them a force for change is not just their demographic muscle. This is the first generation to grow up digital, and they're different. Now, this cartoon here is from Growing Up Digital in 1997. When I put this up back then, people would be falling off their chairs. They'd be laughing so hard. A baby using a computer, crazy. Today everyone looks at this like, what's that weird thing? I mean, why doesn't the baby have an iPad or a laptop or something like that? Now, time online for kids growing up today is not taken away from hanging out with your friends, learning the piano, talking to your parents, or doing your homework. Time online is taken away from television. The baby boomers, my generation, watch 24 hours a week of TV per kid. These kids watch a lot less TV, and they watch it differently. They come home, they turn on their computer, and they're in 3 different windows, and they got 3 magazines open, and they're texting and listening to iTunes, and they got a video game go. Oh yeah, and they're doing their homework. And the TV may be going on in the background, but the TV's kind of like music. You know, it's like ambient media. And when they're online, what are they doing? Well, rather than being the passive recipients of somebody else's video, they're the actors, the initiators, the organizers, the searchers, the authenticators. They're composing their thoughts and telling their stories. They're remembering things. They're so-called multitasking. This is creating a generation that actually thinks differently. Now, what does all this do to the brain and to performance? Well, first of all, they're actually not the dumbest generation. They're the smartest generation by the measure of smartness. It's called IQ, and IQ's been going up for many years. Secondly, they're graduating from university like never before, and SAT scores should have dropped because the SAT back in my day was taken by only the best kids from the very best schools. Today, everybody takes it. That should have brought big downward pressure on the mean, but it hasn't. SAT scores have held their own or even gone up. It's never been tougher to get into the best universities, and kids are graduating today like never before. And furthermore, they want to be smart. We asked these 11,000 kids, which would you rather be, smarter or better looking? And the vast majority of them said smarter. There was only one country where they said they wanted to be better looking. If you'd like an interpretation of that, I'm not going there. Now, there are 2 critical periods of brain development, 0 to 3, early childhood, and extended adolescence, about age 8 to 18. And this is, extended adolescence is when a third of the human brain gets built. We're talking about the synaptic connections in the brain. And the number one variable determining what your brain is like after your DNA is how you spend your time. And if you spend 24 hours a week being the passive recipient of TV, like my generation did, you get a certain kind of brain. If you spend an equivalent amount of time being the actor, the organizer, the initiator, the rememberer, that affects your brain as well. And Dr. Stan Kuchar, a famous Canadian psychiatrist who worked with us on this program, argued that this is now taking the brain past its conventional limitations. These kids aren't multitasking. You know, they've got better active working memory and better switching abilities. It looks like you're doing 5 things at once, plus their homework. They're not. I mean, I can't even listen to iTunes and read email at the same time, but my kids can. Now, there's a problem. The top third are spectacular. The middle third are doing okay compared to previous generations. The bottom third are dropping out of school in Canada and the United States. Now, there are reasons for this. Lots of people blame the internet. How about the fact that this bottom third come from single-parent families where the mom doesn't have time to talk to the kid, let alone work with them on their homework if she was so inclined. There's a whole bunch of inner-city stuff, gang-related stuff. Kids are coming to school hungry. We're teaching with an old model of pedagogy where teachers broadcast to students and they don't learn well doing that. I mean, there are real reasons why the bottom third are performing well. And to blame the internet is sort of like blaming the library for ignorance. This is not a problem of technology or media, it's a public policy problem. We have to fix the schools. And the internet's not the problem, it's actually key to the solution of moving to a new interactive model of learning. Now, how about in the family? Well, this is the org chart of the family I grew up in, the boomer family. I mean, mom reported to dad and the kids reported to mom. I was kid number 1 of 5, which meant the dog reported to me. Yes. But this was enshrined in popular culture. Father knows best, right? Now you look at and oh, by the way, and there was a big generation gap. Big differences between kids and parents over values, lifestyle, ideology, culture, and so on. The family of today looks more like this. Kid is in the center. You got parents and also step-parents, because a lot of families are broken up or non-traditional. And then you have grandparents and others around it. And there is no generation gap. Kids and parents get along really well today. Look at your iPod and your kid's iPod. There's overlap. I mean, my parents didn't even like the Beatles, let alone, you know, the Doors or something like that. What we have today is something very different. I called it, well, let me explain. This is the first time in human history when children are an authority about something really important. I was an authority on model trains when I was 11. Today, the 11-year-old is an authority on this digital revolution that's changing business, commerce, government, learning, publishing, every institution in society. So rather than a generation gap, we have a generation lap, where kids are lapping their parents on the digital track. And if you have a teenager in your house, you know what I'm talking about. Who does the systems administration in your home? So this is humbling. And we fear what we don't understand. A humbling story from me. It's about 7 years ago. I gave my son Alex, he was 20 at the time, third year of university. I gave him an advance copy of a book I'd written called Wikinomics. I gave it to him as a Christmas present. I gave him some other things for Christmas, too, okay? But he says, thanks, Dad. He goes off, starts reading it, comes back a couple hours later. He says, hey, Dad, this is a good book. It's like he's surprised or something. And he says, I think I'll create a community on Facebook. Now, I just come on to Facebook. So I said, can I watch? 15 minutes later, he's created the Wikinomics community. Another 15 minutes later, he's got 6 members. By the time we're eating turkey on Christmas Eve, he's got 130 members in 7 countries, 7 regional coordinators, a president, secretary, and chief information officer for the community. He's created a PDF of the first 2 chapters of the book, sent it out to the community. Before I'm eating Christmas dinner, I got kids writing back in saying, Mr. Tapscott, we found errors in your book. and the community is placing demands on me. One of the kids writes in and says, exactly how is Mr. Tapscott going to be contributing to our community? What is this? Self-organization. Self-organization's been around throughout human history, but now it has a wonderful new power, and this is being reflected throughout all of society. You go to Tunisia to get an example of that. How about bullying? Well, bullying is a problem. No kid should be bullied. But the actual research that's been done, I mean, cyberbullying, when studied in proper context, is a low prevalence phenomenon, and it hasn't actually increased. And there are a whole bunch of problems related to this that maybe we should be focusing on. Like the #1 killer of young people today is suicide. And a tiny percent of those have anything to do with bullying. Maybe we ought to focus on untreated mental illness amongst young people and about having the universities able to respond when someone goes into a depression or has a psychotic episode. I think we fear what we don't understand. And as for they don't give a damn, youth volunteering in Canada and the United States has been growing year over year for 15 years. It's a great generation. We can be very hopeful about them. And they're into alcohol and drugs. The percent of kids in Canada and the United States that are clean, that don't do either drugs or alcohol in high school, has been growing year over year for 15 years. They're a bunch of criminals. Well, actually, youth crime has been dropping in Canada and the United States year over year for 15 years. We fear what we don't understand. Now, this is just a little example. This is a panel that I held in front of a big audience, thousands of people, and I talked to these kids. I don't have time to go through it, but I'll just, on the third from the left there is Sherry Kong, a 20-year-old student from New Zealand, hired with 80 other students by the government. Their job? To teach the teachers how to use the internet in the classroom. I said to her, so, Sherry, what are the teachers like as students? She says, oh, Mr. Tapscott, the teachers, they're awful. They talk in class. They don't do their homework. And beside her is Michael Furtick, the granddaddy of them all. He's from Toronto. He was 28 at the time. And I've known Michael since he was 13 years old when he was the project manager on my website, growingupdigital.com. They made him the project manager because he was the oldest and most experienced on the team. When Mike was 15, he sold his own site for an undisclosed 7 or 8 figure US dollar sum. One of the news reports said it was probably only $1 million. And I sent him an email, Michael, you sold it for $1 million. You should have called me. And he wrote back and he said, Don, legally I can't tell you how much I sold it for, but I can tell you I'm very happy. And he used the money to build a new venture. It's called takingitglobal.org. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of young people who want to change the world. So we've always been uneasy about kids. Kids are to be seen and not heard. Youth is wasted on the young. You combine that with the fact that this is the first time ever when the kids in the schools know more about the big revolution in learning than the teachers. And the kids in the family know more about the social media that's affecting relationships. And the young people coming into the workforce have better tools at their fingertips than exist in our most important corporations. This is a formula for fear. Now, of course, there's a dark side. You know, there are all kinds of issues. You want to make sure that your kids are safe, that they have balance. We need to do something about the failing schools. There's a digital divide. We don't want to create a world of digital haves and have-nots, although this is closing rapidly. There's a generational firewall as these kids come into the workforce and they bump up against Dilbert Inc. You know, in their culture is the new culture of work, and it's being resisted. And the biggest concern is privacy. Talk to your kids. They give away too much information online. And there's a danger that our basic right to privacy, which is the foundation of a free society, is being eroded. These are real issues, but let's focus on the real questions. Now, I'd like to end with a story. I was asked by the management of a large American university to come in and spend some time with them. They're doing a $1 billion fundraise, and they're wondering, what does a 21st century university look like? And so I explained, I think the university And the model of pedagogy that we have today here is the best model that like 17th century technology can provide. You know, I'm a teacher, I have knowledge, you're a student, you don't, get ready, here it comes. And we need to change the model from a teacher-focused model to a student-focused model that's collaborative and interactive. And we need to do this because of a new generation. So they say, okay, let's have a discussion. And one of the deans turns to a youngster named Joe. He's 20 years old in the room. He says, Joe, you're our one student. Tell us what you think. And he says, Joe says, well, I've been sitting here thinking about this, and I think as a generation we do learn differently. Let me explain. I don't read books. And the look in the room is kind of like the look in this room. Right now he says, I think I'm knowledgeable, but I don't read books. If I go onto the internet to get my information, I've got really good BS detectors. I know what's knowledge and what's fake knowledge. And he says, if I need to read a physical book, I don't follow someone else's narrative. I'm in the table of contents, I'm in the contents, I'm in the index, I'm out on the web, I'm interacting. I don't read books. So the dean of the film school is sitting beside me, and he says to the group, well, I don't know if that's really interesting and exciting, Joe, or if it means the end of civilization. So after the session, I said, look, Joe, it was a great session. Afterwards, I said, I want to get to know you. And so we sat down, I interviewed him. And I said, tell me about yourself. He says, what do you want to know? I said, how good a student are you? He says, I'm a good student. I said, how good? He says, well, I've always had A's, 4.0 grade average. He's a good student. I said, do you do anything else? He says, well, I'm the president of the Students' Council here. I have been for 2 years. I've got a budget of $14 million. I'm on 18 committees. I chair 12 of them. That takes some time. And I said, yeah, I'm sure that does. Anything else? He says, well, the big thing the last while is my girlfriend is from New Orleans, and when Katrina hit, we went down there to see what we could do, and there was no healthcare clinic in the devastated 9th Ward, so I set one up. I said, you set up a healthcare clinic? He says, yeah. You have the internet. You can do anything you want to do. You need an air conditioner? You can get an air conditioner. I said, Joe, that's amazing. What? Did it work out? He says, yeah, it's still functioning. It's called the 9th Ward Healthcare Clinic. It sees 9,000 patients a year. I said, tell me about your family. He sighs. He says, tough year. Both my parents died. One in an accident, and the other got sick. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry, Joe. Do you have siblings? And he says, yeah, I've got a bunch of younger siblings, so it's my job to keep the family together. And I said, well, how do you do that? And he says, well, they don't live here, so we're online all day long. We're texting and interacting. He says, you know the best thing? We created a guild on World of Warcraft, and we slay dragons together as a family. It's awesome. I said, what are you doing next year? He says, well, I'm going to England. I'm taking a master's degree. And he says, I'm so excited because I'm going to have the British healthcare system. We just didn't have healthcare as kids because we were poor. We never went to the doctor. But he knows all about the British healthcare system. He knows about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He knows about Ronald Coase's theory of transaction costs. He's as knowledgeable as anybody I've met. He doesn't read books. So I said to him, where are you going? He says, Oxford. I'm doing a master's in philosophy. And I said, that's amazing. Oxford and Cambridge would be the two hardest places to get into in the world. And I said, did you get some kind of financial aid? And he said, oh, yeah, it's great. I got this scholarship. It covers everything. I said, cool. Where'd that come from? He says, oh, it's called a Rhodes Scholarship. The Rhodes Scholar in 2009 from this university doesn't read books. Bob Dylan, there's something going on here, and you don't know what it is. So we told young people, you work hard, you stay out of trouble, you graduate, you can have a good and prosperous life. Turns out my generation was not so accurate with that. Furthermore, we've come up with this awful stereotype where we blame them for the problems. We need to fix this. You know, the Arab Spring was enabled by social media in ways that all kinds of people don't understand. And you look around the world today, it's happening right now in Turkey, and where young people are saying, we want hope. We don't want to be treated as subjects. We want democracy. We don't want corruption. And we want opportunities. And you can call Occupy a bunch of losers and hippies and anarchists, but that would be a superficial way of thinking about it. As we speak, there are thousands of people in the streets of cities all across Brazil, kids who want hope. And the largest demonstrations in Canadian history were held last year in Quebec. People say, a bunch of greedy kids don't want to pay tuition. It wasn't about that. It was about a generation that wants to have hope and that wants to do well. So now I'm speaking to the baby boomers. Boomers, lighten up. The kids are all right. And if we listen to them for the first time in history, the children can help show us the way. And maybe if we start to do the right thing, that this smaller world that their kids inherit might actually be a better one. Thank you very much.
It's always daunting for me to listen to Don because he's constantly reminding me that my media, our magazine, our radio stations, our television stations are all dated, if not dead. There is hope, Don. Thanks so much.
Thank you.